Hello and welcome. Today, we're not just going to talk about what makes a good ad. No, we're going to talk about what makes an ad irresistible. We're diving deep into the hidden psychological wiring that actually compels us to click. A strategy that isn't built on giving you more information, but on the precise, incredibly strategic art of holding it back.
Think about this quote for a second. Marketers assume that sales are driven by giving information. I mean, that's what we're all taught, right? More features, more benefits, more data. That's supposed to be how you persuade someone. But what if that's all backward? What if the real secret, the engine behind every ad that you just have to click, is the art of withholding the answer? This is the huge paradox we're going to unpack today. The most successful campaigns out there, they operate on a completely different level, tapping into a fundamental and, often uncomfortable part of our human nature.
So, that's the big question, isn't it? How on earth can withholding information be more powerful than giving it? It just feels wrong. But the answer isn't in some old marketing textbook. It's actually found in neuroscience. It's all about creating a very specific feeling inside the user's mind. You know that feeling? That nagging sense of an open loop, a question that's just hanging there unanswered? It's like an intellectual itch that our brains are literally hardwired to scratch. All right, so here's our roadmap for the next 12 minutes. First, we'll tackle the great advertising paradox. Then, we'll get into the science of compelled clicks and find out why this whole strategy came to be. After that, we'll look at the brain's aversion to uncertainty. That's the deep dive. Then we get practical with engineering the perfect question. We'll follow that up by framing the click as relief, and we'll wrap it all up with the secret you now own. Sound good? Let's go.
Okay, let's dive right into Section 1, the Great Paradox. This is where we need to confront the huge illusion that blinds so many marketers. This deeply flawed idea that a giant list of features is the secret to getting someone to act. The truth, as you're about to see, is way more subtle and honestly, infinitely more powerful. So here's the absolute heart of it. The single most powerful reason someone clicks on an ad isn't what they know, it's what they suddenly realize they don't know. It all comes down to the brain's deep-seated, almost primal hatred of uncertainty. An open question, a missing piece of the puzzle, these things create this state of, cognitive discomfort that our minds are just programmed to resolve. That's the lever that smart advertising pulls. And that lever, it has a name, the curiosity gap. The best way to think of it is as a mental itch. It's a whole psychological system designed to point out a very specific and often brand new gap in your knowledge. And being aware of that gap doesn't just make you curious, it creates this uncomfortable, almost aversive state that compels you to find the answer, to scratch the itch. The entire goal is to turn someone passively scrolling into an active, urgent seeker of closure.
Okay, so this whole mental itch thing is obviously super powerful. But where did it even come from as a strategy? In Section 2, The Science of Clicks, we'll see that this isn't just some clever trick. It's a tool that was born out of necessity, a direct response to the modern-day problem of total information overload.
I mean, think about it. We live in an age of constant distraction. Our attention is scarce. The digital world is this relentless battlefield for our focus. And in that environment, a long list of product features is just more noise, right? It's so easy to ignore. Advertisers desperately needed a tool that was instant, that took almost zero mental energy to engage with, and that could force a click before your thumb even had a chance to keep scrolling. The curiosity gap became that perfect weapon. Now, this isn't just marketing fluff. The science behind it was laid out by economist George Loewenstein with his information gap theory. This is the bedrock of the entire concept. What his research showed is that curiosity isn't just some vague feeling. Nope, it's a specific cognitive event. It happens the exact moment we become aware of a gap between what we know and what we suddenly feel we need to know. It's that recognition of a deficiency that triggers the behavior we now see advertisers using every single day. All right, now for the really cool part. Let's pop the hood and see how this thing actually works inside the brain. In Section 3, we're looking at the brain's aversion to uncertainty. This is where we break down the precise, three-stage cognitive engine that powers every single successful curiosity-driven ad. It all happens in 3 super predictable steps. First, anchor knowledge. The ad gives you just enough information to ground you in a topic you already feel familiar with. Something like, you already know that intermittent fasting can help you lose weight. See? That makes you feel like you're on solid ground. Then, step 2, the gap. The ad drops in the crucial missing piece. But did you know there's one common breakfast food that completely cancels out the benefits? Bam!
suddenly a very specific, kind of alarming gap in your knowledge has been exposed. And finally, step 3, compelled action. The call to action is framed not just as an offer, but as the only way to relieve that mental tension you're now feeling.
And you have to get this, that feeling, that awareness of a knowledge gap. It isn't just mildly interesting, it's neurologically uncomfortable. Our brains evolved to see ambiguity and unanswered questions as potential threats, and open loop is an unresolved problem. This creates what's called an aversive state, a kind of low-grade mental anxiety that pushes us, almost forces us, to find closure. So the click, it isn't really driven by a desire for a product. It's driven by a desire to get rid of this discomfort.
So think of it like this. On the left side, you've got the mental itch. That's the aversive uncertainty, the ambiguity, that nagging feeling of incompleteness. That's the tension. Then on the right side, you've got the scratch. That's the cognitive closure, the resolution, and that little hit of dopamine our brain gives us as a reward when we learn something new and satisfy our curiosity. The whole strategy is just to methodically create the feeling on the left to make the relief on the right feel not just desirable, but absolutely necessary.
Okay, so we get the what and the why, but how do you actually build one of these things effectively? Let's move to section 4, engineering the question. We're shifting from the theory to how you can actually apply it. And it's all about creating a gap that's compelling, but, and this is key, not overwhelming. And this is probably the most important rule of the entire game. The gap you create has to feel solvable. If your question is too vague, like, do you want to know the secrets of the universe? Well, that just causes cognitive overload. The brain doesn't even know where to begin, so it just shuts down. And if it's too complex, the user just gives up before they even start. The magic only happens when the user truly believes that a clear, simple, and valuable answer is waiting for them on the other side of one single easy click. So here's your playbook, your step-by-step guide. First, you anchor with specificity. You validate what the user already knows to make them feel competent. Second, you engineer a solvable gap. The missing piece has to feel like a single definitive secret. You know, the one mistake, the single best trick, the 30-second fix. That makes the answer feel totally attainable. And finally, you frame the CTA as resolution. The click is positioned as the fastest, easiest way to get that psychological relief you now crave. Now, let's zoom in on that final, absolutely critical piece in section 5, framing the click as relief. This is where the execution either makes or breaks the whole strategy. It's about turning a simple button into what feels like a truly necessary action. And here's the big mental shift you have to make. From the user's point of view, the click is not an act of interest in your product. It is an act of relief. You have systematically built up this state of mental tension, this intellectual itch. The click is simply their way to resolve that tension and get back to feeling comfortable. They aren't clicking to be sold something. They're clicking to find an answer and make the discomfort go away.
So your call to action, whether it says learn more or find out how or see the answer, it becomes the scratch for that mental itch. It's not just a button on a screen anymore. It's the immediate solution to a problem that you manufactured in their mind just a few seconds earlier. It feels less like a choice and a lot more like a necessity.
And that brings us to our final section, the secret you now own. We've gone through the science, we've gone through the strategy, now let's boil it all down to the profound shift in thinking that the curiosity gap really represents for anyone trying to capture attention. If you take only one thing away from our time together, please let it be this. The highest performing ads out there, they don't sell products, they sell psychological closure. They understand the cold, hard logic of information gap theory, and they apply it to that very human, very powerful aversion we all have to uncertainty. They sell the deep satisfaction of a question finally answered. So to quickly recap, this whole system is just so brutally effective for 3 simple reasons. First, it makes you consciously aware of a solvable gap in your own knowledge. Second, that awareness activates a powerful biological compulsion to find the answer. And third, it masterfully transforms a passive viewer just scrolling through a feed into an active participant who is urgently seeking a solution. And that, right there, is the ultimate secret. The best marketing doesn't just push people toward a sale, it pulls them irresistibly. It works because it sells the answer to a question the buyer didn't even know they had until you so brilliantly asked it for them.